Now that's significant. The Market Research Podcast.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us on this latest episode of Now That's Significant, a market research podcast. This is your host, Michael Howard, the Head of Marketing at InfoTools. Today, we're joined by Shira Horn, Executive Vice President of AMC Global. AMC is a boutique custom research firm that specializes in product launch and all facets related to product success. Shira has been with AMC for 3 years and is committed to collaborating with clients to bring about insights that drive business answers and company growth. Thanks for joining us on the show, Shira.
Hey, Michael, thank you so much for having me. Really happy to be here today.
Well, thank you. So, Shira, what's the most significant thing you're going to share with us today?
Sure. Well, I think maybe it may or may not be so significant for us researchers because we probably experienced it time and time again. But through the pandemic, I think it's become more highlighted than ever before that CPG or really any kind of businesses can have extreme times of growth, but without really tapping into the consumer lens and really having a consumer-centric mindset, right? Those times of success are going to be married by times of downslopes. And so I think the pandemic has really reinforced my personal passion for market research, the role of market research, and really the critical need for insights to really help drive smart business growth.
Cool. So let's look into this a little deeper then. What was your experience, both what you felt or went through, but also what you've witnessed of the pandemic and how brands responded with market research?
Sure. So, wow, what an interesting time we've been through and are currently even still in. I think from a research perspective, it was really eye-opening for me how some businesses, really got it together and responded extremely well. And on the other hand, there were other businesses that either completely ignored the whole thing or recognized it, but didn't really pay any deference to it and just went on sort of business as usual. And, we know this was a very heightened time of disruption in so many ways, personally and professionally. Everyone felt it. And I think there's sort of like that human tie that really bound all of us together. We're all wending through this time of unknown, and smart businesses really capitalized on that. And businesses less successful, just like I said, just kind of went on just doing their own thing. And so for us at AMC, when things first began to shut down, we felt an immediate impact on our work, on the work that we could do and the work that we couldn't do, right? We couldn't go to facilities for product testing anymore. We couldn't travel for qualitative groups. And so sort of the landscape of the research for us shifted. And personally and professionally, I kind of felt a little helpless. And so, we had a meeting of the minds at AMC, and we decided that we were going to take action and do what we know best, which is market research. And so we started an initiative that we call Sign of the Times. And essentially, we started running an ongoing survey that pulses consumers on a range of topics. And each wave had a new wave of, new theme to it. And we did this with our partners at OpinionRoute, who are wonderful sample providers. And we talked about things like COVID concerns and food safety, and things that were really near and dear to our clients' hearts, like alcohol consumption and shopping behavior, and also, hey, what the future might look like. So we really tried to utilize the sign of the times to kind of give back a little bit and to also help us in a small way feel like we were doing what we could.
Yeah, nice. So you had all of this data. It would be tempting just to sit on it and either drip feed it out or even monetize it. What did you do with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we really tried to share the information far and wide. This was not about making money. There was no monetization included at all. We really wanted to be a partner, right? We wanted to really help be a partner to brands and organizations who were really scratching their heads and wondering what was going on, just like we were, right? So, as a mechanism to help get through some of these tough times, we wanted to share sort of like the latest and greatest consumer insight into their behaviors, into their attitudes on, relevant topics. And so the information, we wrote blogs about it, we posted it, we sent it to newsletters, we put it on LinkedIn, so forth and so on. We really tried to get the word out, not as a marketing campaign, but really as just a, hey guys, like we have some interesting stuff to share. And so let's go ahead and share it. We tried to make what we projected out to the universe to be fun and visual and like little nuggets of information that represented to us the most interesting and also meaningful to brands and organizations, like those nuggets that really matter, that could help them kind of see what the future is holding, right? When do consumers feel like things are opening back up? When will shopping behaviors like sort of rebound to normal, and so forth and so on? So, as researchers, we're super inquisitive. We're a curious bunch. And so, we had questions too. And this was a way for us to help wrap our heads around understanding what other consumers felt. So instead of just talking to Shira or just talking to my colleague or just talking to Michael, we were able to go a little bit broader and then utilize that and share with others.
Yeah, cool. What was the reception like with the market? How was it received?
Yeah, it was received really well. We got a lot of very positive feedback from our clients. Honestly, even colleagues who work in other market research firms, they were really excited to see it. And it's our work has been published in many different publications as well. And so I think that it was exciting for us to just know that it wasn't just us, right? It wasn't just us who were like really clamoring to get some grounding, some data around what was happening. It seemed like everybody really wanted to hear what was going on.
Yes. The whole unprecedented times is word of the year, was it not? So was this quite a pivot moment for you? The propagation of the results, what you're doing, or was it something baked into both your and AMC Global's DNA?
That's such a good question. I'd like to think it's a reflection of who we are at AMC. We're a small boutique firm. Everything we do is completely custom, and we're a tight-knit group. We're tight-knit internally, and we're really tight with a lot of our clients. We like to say that we feel like we're extensions of our clients' teams. So, in that regard, I think it really is, aligned with who we are and who we want to be. In fact, our company values, we have 4 sort of pillars. We're stewards of the highest quality research, right? We're creative thinkers with creative solutions. We build partnerships that last. And we act with integrity. And so when I think about the sign of the times and our company values, I really think that, the process of creating the sign of the times and being committed to it really is a nice marry with who we are as an organization.
Cool. So coming back to the pandemic survey, can you tell us a bit more about the study, the methodology you used, perhaps the areas of consumer behavior and sentiment that you explored?
Oh, sure. I guess my first point is that they really varied. The topics that we covered varied greatly from how people were shopping, right, at the height of the lockdowns, to how they intended to shop in the future, right? I mean, think about some of the practical things that we were hearing, right? Like, oh, don't touch your mail, wipe down your groceries, right? And then therefore we heard like, hey, where do I find cleaning products? It's impossible to shop. Do I go online or do I do a click and collect? Am I allowed to go into the grocery store? And so like all of these things were sort of manifesting, and our topics really had to cover off on that broad range. We covered things like, financial stability and outlook for the future, things like alcohol consumption, and so forth and so on. And so it really, ran the gamut from both a behavioral perspective to also attitudinal. And, as the pandemic wound down, if that's even fair to say, I'm not sure, but some of the critical mass pieces seem to calibrate a little bit. We started to dig into other areas like environmental and sustainability and so forth and so on.
Very cool. So you've talked about this being a bit more of a longitudinal study. Did it start off that way, or did you just think, let's just see where this goes?
Wow, yeah, good question. I'm not really sure where we thought it would end up when we first started to run it. We did know at the beginning. So at the beginning of Sign of the Times, we were running it every 2 weeks. And now we're, first it started every couple of weeks, then it was every other week. Now we're running it, every couple of months. And so we knew that things were changing so quickly that in the beginning, we really had to run it very frequently. Otherwise, we were going to miss those key windows and really only get pieces of the full picture, where we really wanted to be sort of really holistically understanding how consumers were thinking and feeling and what they were doing during this crazy time. So it's still going, and we're excited that it is still going. We don't have an end in sight. Perhaps there won't be an end in sight, and we'll, in 10 years laugh about the fact that it started during the COVID pandemic and has just sort of lived on over time. I'm not really sure when we'll stop or why we'll stop. However, I do know that there's still an appetite for getting this information. And so we're still going to do it. And, perhaps that will be our sort of our trigger, is when we see interest waning, then maybe we will, I guess if our interest wanes as well, right, that's maybe when we'll say, hey, you know what, we went there, we did it, it's time to shut it down.
Yeah, cool. So I'm quite a practical, results-driven person. I guess it's hard not to be in our industry. So I'm quite interested in the fascinating insights you uncovered throughout the study. Can you shed any light on findings, some of the most interesting results, and maybe some of the most unexpected as well?
Sure. So this is a really fun one because, excuse me, as we get the results each wave, there's almost always at least one morsel that I'm like, oh, cool. That is really, really fascinating. So it was, I'm prepping for our chat today, going through my list of the top ones. It was really hard to pick. But I do have a few things to share. So one is consumers, from what we can tell, are really much more open to adopting new tech. So when really everything was shut down and we had very few options, if you went to a restaurant or did takeout or so forth and so on, many times you had like a QR code menu that you had to access. And what we found is that consumers really liked that. Yeah. And so, what we're finding is that about 50% of consumers want to stick with QR and mobile delivery menus at restaurants. And then I think the tech adoption and like QR codes and the like has really helped, at least for in the US, for that adoption to really explode, because so many of our clients are asking ways in which consumers are open to utilizing QR codes. Yeah. And like typically the States has been a little bit behind regions like APAC in accepting and using on a regular basis QR codes. And so I think what we're starting to see is like this shift over to like, oh yeah, like this isn't hard to use. We can get down with this. This can bridge to additional and important information.
So QR codes have been around for nearly a decade now, and they've always been struggling to find their place in the world. And it finally took COVID to get them into the mainstream.
Exactly. And so, I think QR codes like such like a tactical and fascinating, sort of explosion. And I do wonder, like when we, in 2, 5, 20 years, what other sort of elements will we look back on and say, hey, COVID really either forced us or allowed us or whatever to adopt new attitudes or behaviors or whatever it might be. Speaking of consumption and changes that we saw is in the alcohol space. So if you're at the beginning of the shutdown, I was really comforted a lot by wine and chocolate. And we realized through the sign of the times that, it wasn't just me and my little bubble at my house, like drinking alone. We saw a tremendous rise in alcohol consumption. And, folks really anticipated it staying, high or more than previous for a long time. And funny enough, about a third of people say that they still, and really in perpetuity, want to have the ability to get to go cocktails from their favorite restaurants and bars. Yeah. But then, on the flip side of that, we also see a tremendous rise in no and low alcohol beverages. And so, at the beginning of the pandemic, alcoholic beverages were like way up top, and they are still on a growth trajectory, particularly in certain segments. But, we know from some of the other work streams that we have going on that really there is a big growth sector within that space for no and low alc. And so that is another really interesting component. The environment and the environmental impact. So 80% of consumers feel that COVID and our stay-at-home orders had a positive impact on the environment, and people felt really great about that. I don't think that, if given a choice, right, it was a forced stay at home. I don't think they would have made those same decisions to not drive as much and not, eat out as much and all of those things. But, in reflecting upon the some of the positive outcomes of COVID, that was certainly one that we saw. I think also COVID really helped us to be more sensitive and illuminate more corporate responsibility. So what we're seeing is that almost 70% of consumers want to hear how companies are treating their employees and handling their employees. And we see that consumers are more likely to spend their dollars, particularly younger folks, with companies that align with their corporate responsibility vision. So that's something I think consumers are more discerning in that realm than maybe they had been before. And finally, the last tidbit I'll share is around supply chain. So we all know, like in the height of the pandemic, availability was the biggest driver of what you brought home, and also the biggest concern for consumers. And in a lot of categories, that's really shifting back to normal. Although we are seeing in a recent sign of the times that more than half of consumers are concerned about product shortages in 2022, and it is really top of mind for them. And if we think to like current day and the infant formula shortages that we see, I think that the consumers were really kind of spot on in saying we do anticipate some categories where it will be hard to find product.
Yeah, and we're even still seeing lockdowns in some big countries trying to just protect their own countries as well, and still having an impact on I guess other countries that are reliant on overseas production. So yes. Why is keeping a close eye on consumer behavior more important than ever? And how did some of the data and insights that you uncovered prove this?
Yeah, well, I think COVID really sent us all reeling. It kind of stopped us all in our tracks. And so, we were all at home, we were uncertain about what we were doing or what was going to happen the next day, and certainly the future seemed like a big question mark. And so what we saw at AMC is that for a little while, strategic research we couldn't execute any strategic research because consumers were just not in the place to really give us I'll say any reliable information related to, any anticipatory behavior or attitudes, and they couldn't really sort of think more broadly. We could do tactical research because they could say, hey, I like this package more than this package, or the price of a widget should be X, and things like that. But there was not any real, we couldn't give them anything too complex or anything too outside their sort of immediate realm or immediate bubble. And our clients, they were heavily focused on supply chain issues for a while. And so, I think many of the most successful organizations, right, sort of always are thinking, hey, like what's next? Like what innovations are we going to come out with? And that really had to be put on pause because they were just our clients were so concerned and focused, rightfully so, on, hey, how are we going to produce enough product to get it on shelves so that consumers can have it? And so that was sort of the world that we were living in. And then slowly, as things sort of settled down a little bit, we were able to do quality. We were able to do more strategic work. And really right now, we're sort of back to doing all kinds of research, from strategic innovation workshops to pack testing to, tracking new product launches and so forth. But, I think at the core, our landscape has shifted, I believe, somewhat permanently, just in the way that we approach things, right? And the sign of the times was really a mechanism to keep tabs on consumer attitudes and behaviors, And we were actually using Sign of the Times as a barometer for sharing with our clients for when we felt like things were calibrating a little bit back to normal, right? When we could like see like, hey, they were like telling us that they were like less concerned about certain things and they were resuming normal activities. And that was a signal for us to say, okay, guys, we can go back to really offering our clients, the full breadth of what AMC can do. And so I really feel like in some ways, COVID certainly like reset the world. And I think it reset research as well.
Yeah.
We were forced to pause for a moment, to think, to recommit to what matters to each of us and as organizations. And our Sign of the Time surveys, they really felt like something that we wanted to do, but also the responsible thing to do, like as a small token, small nuggets of information that we could sort of send out into the world and hopefully, help people, help companies, or at least just be interesting sort of distractions, if you will. And so, I think now, I didn't really realize when we were first starting it, but I'm incredibly proud of the AMC team for committing to Sign of the Times and for, helping to give back even in this very, very small way in leveraging what we do best, which is research, right? And kind of like harnessing our brain power for that good. And I think we really uncovered some extremely fascinating things that certainly helped us, but things that really helped our clients make the next moves for research, supporting their teams, for their organizations, and really helped to almost, it was a signal for them, like when can we get back and get moving, and what kinds of things should we be thinking about, and how do we need to like approach this with a more empathetic lens. And so Sign of the Times, we didn't set out intending to do this, but really has cascaded down to have an impact on all of the work that we're doing currently, whether it's sort of more apparent or a little bit more behind the scenes.
Yeah, sure. So do you think, were there any industries or sectors that you worked in that were more that were faster to get back to that strategic research than others?
Yes, I think from what I've seen, CPG was sort of like the first to get back there. I think with the exception of maybe a few companies who were like really needing to double down and solely focus on supply chain. But yes, the CPG world seemed to us to kind of sort of get back up and running the fastest. And then very quickly, many industries followed.
Yeah, okay. And another point I want to touch on is you made a comment about the COVID being a reset for market researchers. So as we come out the other end of the pandemic, like you said, if the world returning to normal, what does that reset look like for insight teams?
Yeah, I mean, wow, I wish I had a crystal ball, because I don't know that any of us really know what it ultimately will look like, but I do think I do have a couple of thoughts around that. So, I think from personally, right, we used COVID, right, each individual person to we were forced to slow down, and that really set the trajectory for kind of taking stock and assessing what matters, and putting down some goals, right, and prioritizing the things that we care about. And so that personal sort of journey, I think also laddered to professional ones as well, right? And so I know for us at AMC, like me personally, as well as an organization, we've done a lot of soul searching as like, who are we today and who do we want to be? And I do feel like many of our clients have done, gone through similar exercises. We certainly see that for many of our clients, there is a sort of a refocus on their core strengths, like doubling down on what they do best and kind of letting everything else just sort of like go into the background. We've also really seen a commitment to innovation and really trying to understand what consumers want from a next perspective. So I love that when, instead of a bunch of people from an organization sitting around a room and just making decisions as to what consumers want, we see a lot of resources around, hey, let's tap into the consumer mindset. Let's see where there's white space. Let's understand what kinds of products and services we need to offer to meet consumers where they are currently. So I think that's a really exciting sort of next step proposition for many of our clients. I do know, just sort of anecdotally, similar to sort of the rest of the world, right? We've all heard about this great resignation and lots of people moving jobs. And, market research is not insular to that. So we have seen many of our clients sort of shifting to other organizations. But I think for me, probably even more interesting than that is our clients' internal teams. Lots of shifting there on the brand side. And so our clients are almost having to go back, right? And sort of like start from scratch, right? Like, hey, here's what research we have. Here's the role of research. Here's what's coming up next. And so that has forced another reset, another level of scrutiny on, hey, who do we want to be? What are we great at? Where do we need to work? And where do we want to spend the dollars? And so I think that's really helped all of this, right? In totality has really helped us kind of say, like, okay, let's go back to who we are and what we want to do, right? We want to think smartly. We want to think collaboratively. We want to think creatively, and then, set a path forward for how research needs to really sort of substantiate whatever business questions need to be addressed.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. Thank you so much. So if I can recap quickly what we've talked about today, the critical role that market research plays in helping organizations track and understand consumer behavior, especially in times of crisis. We had an overview of the work you're doing at AMC Global, including the primary research you facilitated with the help of OpinionRoute. You shared some insight into the practices and methodologies used in the study and the reasons why you decided to make the findings of that study open to anyone who wants it. You called out some key findings from Sign of the Times, such as tech adoption, beverage consumption, environmental impacts, corporate responsibility, and the gift that keeps on giving, that is supply chains. You shed some light on why it's important to keep an eye on changes in consumer behavior. And finally, you shared with us what's in store potentially for the market research sector in this post-pandemic world. We're either in or at some point unknown to us in time will enter. So I think that covered it.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a great summary. And I think the only other thing that I'd love to just add is, market research, a lot of times we have to pivot, and we tell our juniors this all the time, right? Being able to successfully pivot is part of the game, right? And, I think we were able to do that through Sign of the Times. And I do sort of hope that, for the greater good, that us all going through this experience collectively, right, as sort of one sort of ebb of humanity that, God forbid if this were to happen again or other challenges, that we're able to really harness what we know, keep, our morals intact, and really just do the best that we can in pivoting and getting through. And it feels really good now to not be on the other side of it. That might not exist, but at least being able to see certain things return to normal, and professionally we're able to kind of go back to doing what we love and helping address really challenging business needs, and that feels really, really good.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this episode today, Shira.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really a lot of fun.
You're welcome. For the listeners out there, if you like what you listened to today or heard, feel free to subscribe to the podcast, share it with others, or leave a review on your podcast platform. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you for listening to Now That's Significant.